with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, January 25th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Juliet Hooker, author of Black Grief, White Grievance, The Politics of Loss. And later, Zachary Foster of the Palestine Nexus newsletter will be with us to talk about the true history of the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, Biden gets the UAW endorsement, despite some vocal rank and file about doing so before Biden calls for a ceasefire. Israeli tank shells strike a UN shelter in southern Gaza yesterday, killing 12. Hospitals hanging by a thread under siege. Israeli protesters block aid trucks coming into Gaza. What wonderful, wonderful, kind people. The IDF continues destroying civilian structures for a buffer zone, another middle finger to the U.S. Tomorrow, the ICJ will rule on the emergency injunction measure in South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Almost every Senate Democrat signs on to a measure supporting a Palestinian state. The two dissenters, Manchin and John Fetterman. Even Sinema joined on. Greg Abbott keeps defying the Supreme Court and the federal government, blocking Border Patrol from accessing the border and constructing razor wire. Ohio Republicans override the Republican governor's veto banning youth trans care in the state. An Alabama prisoner, Kevin Smith, is set to be executed today using an untested method of nitrogen gas, hypoxia, after an excruciating botched execution by lethal injection in 2022. So they tried to do it to him already. He writhed in pain for hours, and now they're using an untested method on him. Argentina staged a general strike yesterday protesting Javier Milei's right-wing agenda. Arizona's Republican chairman resigns after a tape surfaces showing him trying to bribe Kari Lake to drop out of her Senate race. House probe into Matt Gaetz' conduct with an underage girl begins requesting materials from the Department of Justice.
On that Venmo?
A new study finds rent is unaffordable for a record half of U.S. renters. And lastly, Mitch McConnell tells his caucus to reorient away from Ukraine aid and towards immigration because that's what Trump wants. Still his party, baby. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an M Majority Report Thursday. Hello.
Yeah, I don't think you need to say you're in for Sam on M Majority Report Thursday.
Okay, but the problem is that I've already gotten into the flow of saying that, and you now telling me that
exactly.
is going to ruin everything.
A split second of delay.
I have carefully constructed a Jenga tower. And you're just taking one of the blocks out.
Well, I will quote a heterodox thinker, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, in his Anti-Fragile, and say, like, we need to mix things up a little bit because that's how you make things stable.
You want to give me some calluses, right? All right. Well, we'll work on that. Yes, I guess I'm not in for Sam. This is my day. Soon to be all of it. But wait and see, folks. Wait and see. So, headline this, but there is this standoff at the border that continues. Greg Abbott just posturing for political reasons, defying the Supreme Court's temporary request as they look into the case for Greg Abbott to stop constructing razor wire on property, the border, that is supposedly the federal government. I mean, it is the federal government's property. This is the jurisdiction of the federal government. It's quite clearly delineated in the Constitution, although we're about to see how Greg Abbott makes his case here. They're continuing to use immigration as a political cudgel against Biden. That is going to be, I think, the central attack from the Republicans and from Trump heading into the election. And so they have to inflate the threat of people coming across the border seeking asylum. This is the kind of thing that happens, right? There are temporary crackdowns on the border. Immigration kind of slows down for a bit. Asylum, what'd you say?
I'd say like semi-performative.
Right, exactly. But it slows down for a little bit. You know, under Title 42, immigration obviously did slow down, but Title 42 was a pandemic-era rule that was used by the Trump administration and continued way too long by the Biden administration to turn away people seeking asylum, fleeing political persecution from coming into the United States, basically under the guise of pandemic public health measures. Yep. And so it's a little bit hard to make that case when Biden has basically said we're moving on from COVID, we have no federal guidelines, to still claim that migrants are some sort of public health threat.
Back to work.
But Biden won't provide any other counter narrative, right? He's just continuing to say we do have a problem on the border. I'm going to work with Republicans on this front. And it doesn't really matter what he does. This is what we keep saying. Biden could be as right-wing as possible on the border, and Fox News Republicans like Greg Abbott would continue to say that he's not. This was the letter.
This logic has been, Bill Clinton and Obama both tried it.
Yeah.
Now they're open border presidents, according to Republicans.
Exactly. They'll always be that until you say what your differentiating policy is. What options are Democrats presenting that are distinct from Republicans? And right now, Abbott's just doing kind of old school Confederate stuff here. This was the letter that he sent out saying that he's not going to comply with the Supreme Court. He's not going to comply with the president, the executive branch. It all hinges on this false claim that this is essentially a war of migrants coming over the border. Let's put this letter up here. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. Okay, so like we're talking that kind of language is it might ring a few bells historically, frankly. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. There is no evidence presented for Biden refusing to enforce immigration laws or violating immigration laws.
All sorts of detentions.
Yes, there's absolutely no evidence for it, and he doesn't present it. So let's scroll down to the bottom here, because this is when he tries to make the constitutional claim. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and the other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercy of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. This is why the framers included both Article 4, yes, which promises that the federal government shall protect each state against invasion, and Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which acknowledges the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders. That is false, okay? So,
invasion?
That is, first of all, it hinges on two false claims. One, that this is an invasion, that asylum seekers constitute an invasion. That is not true whatsoever. An invasion from some sort of foreign power, war declared against the United States, would not be in the form of people fleeing their nations because they are either too poor or too unsafe.
The record breakingness of traffic across border we're seeing is massively overstated. If this is an invasion, America has been so invaded the entirety of its lifetime.
Yes. So that is the false premise that this relies on as well, that he's not doing his duty to protect the states from invasion. The other false premise is what I just said, that Biden has failed to enforce immigration laws. He can't really cite any real data on this front. But when he cites Article 1, Section 2, it's quite clear that he's the one that is in violation of that. It says, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or some imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Basically, the state is not allowed to engage in wartime practices outside of the federal government's jurisdiction. It makes it quite clear, but he is inverting that in his letter to the president and to the public. So Abbott is a real prick, but only to be outdone really by his attorney general, Ken Paxton, who spoke with Steve Bannon about their moves, essentially, to flip off Biden, and the administration, claiming they're collaborating with drug cartels and that this is what the administration is seeking. Kind of just great replacement theory adjacent BS.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Hide the numbers? They're numbers that we're not seeing publicly that are worse than the public numbers are horrific.
As of yesterday, I didn't see the numbers for December on illegal immigration. The number of people that they brought into the country. I think the numbers that I heard leaked were the largest numbers that I think I've seen since the Biden administration started working with the cartels to get people here.
Yep. When you say working with the cartels, that's a pretty tough charge. I mean, you are the Attorney General of the state of Texas, one of the not just biggest but most important states in the union, an economic powerhouse. Did you just accuse the Biden administration of working with the cartels?
There may not be a written document that says that, but in fact, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They have turned our border into a place where the cartels know that they can basically drop people off, and they're not trying to hide anymore. I mean, under all other administrations, they used to hide, they try to sneak across the border. Now they come straight to Border Patrol, and we're like a processing arm for the cartels. The cartels get paid per person and they make a lot of money on each person. And so the Biden administration is effectively, no matter how you want to slice this, they are partnering with the cartel to get people into our country as fast as possible. And the cartels have ramped it up because they make more money the more people they bring across. And that's why the numbers keep getting larger, because they know they've got a limited amount of time before Joe Biden's out of office, and the cartels are trying to partner as fast as they can with the federal government in getting people across the border. That's a fact.
It's not a fact, obviously.
The way he had to say it's essentially true.
Yeah, we don't have any documentation proving Biden's working with the cartels, but we just have vibes. Yeah, I mean, is it true that cartels and organized groups in Mexico, in other countries, in South America, Latin America, work with migrants trying to get to the United States and help get people across the border? Yeah, that's true. There's partly some of that, because people are desperately trying to flee their countries and seek asylum.
And guess what? Every time you increase so-called border security, whether in the 80s or 90s, it's doing speedboats in the Gulf of Mexico, or now it's building this wall across the entirety and putting razor wire in the Rio Grande, they get to extract a larger price. That's the only thing that's changed. That's 100% the truth.
I mean, you're creating a black market for the crossing of the border. If you had some sort of coherent asylum-seeking process where people could go through a system and make their case and still be able to show up to their court date, have a processing system, right? That as opposed to shooting people, putting up booby traps so pregnant women drown in the Rio Grande as they get caught in razor sharp wire, then the black market cartel or, organized crime, as they call it, kind of system of people paying or doing the best they can to get across these very militarized borders, that's just going to increase that industry. I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah, and what's changed isn't that, like, all of a sudden the government is working to help people get into this country. What's changed is that there has been a sort of attitude towards refugees instituted by Stephen Miller and ratified now by the Biden administration that says we're going to look at people that come and seek refugee status as if they're some sort of invasion.
Yes, and I mean, to head off just a few of those, some of the points that the right makes for fentanyl, the great majority of fentanyl is trafficked through official ports of entry, not through the border, not through asylum seekers, not through frickin' Eagle Pass. That 6 million figure of migrants that crossed the southern border starting in October 2020 through the end of last year. Yeah. Of those, it was like around 320 migrants who had some sort of match to the terrorist watch list, and even that is not like a high security threat that the FBI would be setting off alarm bells about. I mean, that's a small figure, and we know how indiscriminate our terrorist watch lists are. Just ask Nelson Mandela, who was on it until 2008, if I'm not mistaken. So, these are all, it's just fear-mongering. And I return to the fact that when we covered Ron DeSantis's tough on migrant policies in Florida, and the fact that he had put in place this law, the Republicans down there, that would create some sort of penalty for business owners using migrants who are undocumented as a part of their workforce, that there was just this incredible uproar. We've covered a town hall where the business owners were freaking out. How can we do business and make money if we're not exploiting these people who are in socially precarious positions within the United States for cheap labor? And the reality is that is what the dark underbelly of American capitalism really looks like. The more militarized the border is, the more precarious, the more scary a situation is for the average migrant living in this country, the more that capitalist bosses and the people that Republicans serve can use their immigration status as a cudgel and as something to hang over the head of the average worker. It's a way to discipline a labor force that already has zero protections because they're under the shroud of secrecy, and because we've decided that we're going to militarize the border instead of creating infrastructure to process human beings who are in many ways, by the way, fleeing circumstances that the United States created, whether it be by coups, whether it be by our war on drugs, what have you, whether it be by sanctions in Venezuela or meddling in elections in Haiti. It's insane. It's insane. And it really, and the fact that Biden isn't kind of looking at this from a 30,000-foot view really is a major failure.
It's every bit as sick as what we're seeing in Israel, just less acute, the way that we treat people who are, like this person saying they're invaders or some commodities of traffickers when really they're victims of our foreign policy. Talk about Venezuela, and we destroyed their oil industry because of the politics. And, I don't think I think the refugee thing and that sort of thing is important to emphasize over the labor thing. But I also will say that we do have somewhat of a labor shortage right now, and you don't see Republicans using that as an opportunity to strengthen labor rights. They're using it as an opportunity to loosen, say, child labor protections.
Exactly.
Because they're trying to squeeze anything we can out of it.
Interesting you say that, Matt, because just on Tuesday in the Florida legislature, the Florida State House was looking to pass a bill that would allow employers to schedule 16 and 17-year-olds for shifts of more than 8 hours on a school night. So
Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed a law that removed paperwork requirements for underage workers. Who's that going to be for? Why would it's so there's more exploitation of kids like the kid that died in the meat processing plant. I forget what state that was in, but go on, Bradley.
And and forget the fact that this so-called bipartisan immigration bill that would be used as the vehicle to allow for more funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is not going to pass anymore because every Republican has made the calculation that they want to wait for Trump to potentially win to have that be the political plank they can run on until Biden ostensibly loses the election.
Right.
That's one area in which they actually don't give a shit about what they call this so-called crisis at the border, because it's actually just for a tool for them to use against Democratic politicians, and they also don't give a shit about it because in lieu of actually doing anything to free up the bottleneck, maybe they can just hire a bunch of kids to do low-wage work for them overnight as they go to school.
Dead on, and that's the truth. All right, folks. Quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Juliet Hooker. We are back, and we are joined now by Juliet Hooker, Royce Family Professor of Teaching Excellence in Political Science at Brown University, Professor of Political Science at Brown University, author of her latest book, Black Grief, White Grievance, The Politics of Loss. Juliet, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, grief and grievance, Black grief, white grievance. I mean, it's right there in the title, obviously, and the way the words sound, right? Grief and grievance sound like they are related, and they are in the English language. But as within the context of political loss within our country, which is what you look at, they mean very, very different things. So let's start there with those kinds of different constructs of grief and grievance.
Absolutely. So one of the arguments in the book is that Black grief and white grievance are two of the driving forces behind racial politics in the United States right now. And so what I'm arguing is that people are mobilizing in the United States in response to real or imagined, in some cases, losses. And that when we think about Black grievance, we can think about a tradition where Black people in the United States have mobilized in response to unimaginable tragedies and become activists to try to get justice for their dead in the case of lynchings, in the case of police killings. And on the other hand, we have white grievance, which is this phenomenon where, because they have been the dominant group at the center of US politics, the dominant group politically, socially, economically, there are some whites who feel like any gain by another group is a form of displacement, right? They react to the sense that the US is becoming a more equal or a more diverse society by seeing themselves as victims and feeling like they are the rightful center of US politics and that they should not ever have to lose. And that if they do lose, it's illegitimate or it was because there was cheating or malfeasance or something of that sort.
I mean, what could you possibly be referencing there, right? Within the, in before the Biden election or Biden came into office, right? There were two prime juxtaposing examples of that: the Black Lives Matter movement in the year 2020, and then January 6th, 6 days after 2020 concluded.
Absolutely. And those are two examples that I write about in the book, right? So January 6th, you see this mobilization of people who are determined to believe that there was, a fraudulent election and refuse to accept that they have lost. And I think part of that narrative that we saw came out of this view that it was, people who weren't, as Sarah Palin would have called them, real Americans who drove the results, right? So so it was multiracial cities, it was college students who shouldn't have been able to vote, this sense that it was the wrong people or it was immigrants, right? And that those people shouldn't have as much of a say in the direction of the country as others.
Right. And it gives, I think, as we analyze what democracy really means, and as we're in this kind of perilous moment for democracy, it really shows, I think, how democracy has grown to we're at a place in its history, right, where it means wildly different things for different people. I mean, it's so in the news, so I apologize for bringing it to this, but it's like Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. And what does democracy mean? I mean, there are millions of Palestinians who can't vote. I mean, what does democracy mean in this country, right? There are so many people who don't have the ability to have their voice heard through the franchise. And you kind of come to see that white grievance surrounding that democracy is more, we want representation for the real folks. And I think that is why there's so much talking past one another when even talking about the concept of democracy.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things here is that we often think about democracy in terms of empowerment, right? You go out, you organize, you get people like you to have say, and your policy gets adopted. But democracy is also about losing, right? It's about losing well. If there has been no, if the rules have been fair and everybody has followed, and you lose a policy argument, you're supposed to accept it and come back. And I think what we're seeing is a real refusal, a sense that if for some people in the United States right now, that if their political project doesn't win, if they can't convert people to their ideas, then they're willing to dispense with democracy. I mean, I think we're seeing this on abortion, right, where you saw some folks who, after the referendums that have, preserved abortion rights, you have, anti-abortion folks saying, well, maybe that's too much direct democracy, right?
Right.
We shouldn't allow that to happen. So I think there's definitely a sense that, democracy is under threat. One of the arguments in the book is that white grievance is actually the biggest threat to U.S. democracy right now. And I think one of the things that we need to look at is the fact that U.S. democracy was not in good shape, right? A lot of people respond to this moment by saying, oh, if we can just get back to the rule of law or get past, Trump or whoever, then we will be fine. But actually, democracy wasn't working for a lot of people, and there are a lot of problems with U.S. democracy that we need to be thinking about.
Certainly. And it strikes me, your book talking about the different and really unfair expectations for how Black versus white voters respond to political loss. Explain that concept to our audience, if you don't mind, and how, honestly, Black voters, specifically Black women within the context of the Democratic Party, are expected to be the heroes of democracy. And the just like completely unfair burden placed on voters that the white working class people at the diner who CNN decided to profile 4,000 times in the wake of Trump's 2016 victory don't necessarily, they don't bear the brunt.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the things that we need to be really clear about is that Black voters in particular, I mean, there's, political science and research that support this, that, the preferences of white voters tend to win more than those of any other voters, irrespective of any other factor. So race is the biggest predictor of whether your policy positions will prevail. But beyond that, I think we tend to think about these moments of extraordinary sacrifices by Black citizens as things that they should simply be doing, right? Things that we have come to expect, or things that we honor, quote unquote, but that don't really drive policy. So one example of this is when we see, these stories that come out every election year about, the people who had to stand in line for 8 hours and how amazing it was that they stood for 8 hours to exercise their right to vote. But it's like, that's not a sign. It's a sign that these people were amazing and civic minded, but it's a sign that democracy isn't working, right? And I think the other thing that, there's another great example that I write about in the book, which I don't know if you remember the Vogue cover of Stacey Abrams, where the title was, "Can Stacey Abrams save U.S. democracy?" Of course, that's a huge ask, but in a way, she and other voting rights activists in Georgia actually did, but she wasn't elected. And that, I think, is symptomatic of this pattern where we want the labor of Black voters, we want their votes, we want them to do this heroic civic work, but we don't necessarily want them as leaders. We don't necessarily want their policy preferences to drive what happens in the country. And so, we get the million profiles of the Trump voters and the diners in the Midwest. And at the same time, we expect people to keep on doing this kind of heroic civic labor without having their needs or their preferences addressed.
Without really any policy, like, just to return to the example that we kind of touched on at the start, there's been zero federal legislation on police reform, like none. And it's not a priority by the Biden administration. They like to fundraise off of it, but I mean, they haven't done anything on that front whatsoever. And yet the expectation is turnout better be high. Democracy is in peril. We need our base, Black women in particular, to get to the polls. And there's not really an ideal democratic relationship between leadership in that way and the base. And it's not, of course, police brutality reform or police reform that needs to be addressed, but that's just one example that sticks out to me as something that is politically mobilizing, but not something that's prioritized by even a Democratic administration.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that you see is this sense in other areas, if you think about something like addressing, gerrymandering, or addressing the ways in which Black voters are disenfranchised, like what can be done in those areas, right? Is there a push, for example, to end felony disenfranchisement and how that affects, because of mass incarceration, disproportionately affects people of color? Or things like, things like student loans, which the administration did try to do and were blocked. But but there's a sense, I think, often that people think that a gain for one group is a loss for them, right? So you have this kind of zero-sum thinking. And I think in trying to appeal or win back, right, those mythical white working class voters, often the calculus is that they're more important, and the policies that Black voters might prefer, that might actually help that constituency, can kind of be set aside in favor of pursuing other blocks of voters.
Yeah, and also the fact that in the political loss that you speak about, loss is not felt in the same way by everybody, if you don't mind touching on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think it's important for us to think about is to think about how loss continues to build on itself, right? So if you think about the sort of psychoanalytical ways in which people think about grief, the idea is, okay, you suffer a loss, you come to terms with it, you eventually move past it. But how do you do that when loss is ongoing? And this is the problem, right? I think for Black citizens in the United States is that if you think about the heroic activism for centuries, really, to try to make the U.S. live up to its commitments in terms of racial equality. And it's still ongoing, right? And anytime there's progress, there's resistance. And that resistance means that anytime there's any kind of gain, you have these moral panics around the sort of specter of racial equality or of advancement by Black people, people of color. And, so now you have these attempts to whitewash US history, these moral panics around things like DEI or critical race theory, where the very idea of actually teaching accurate history, of actually, including the perspectives of Black citizens, is a problem.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, absolutely. And first it's DEI and then it's affirmative action. I mean, it's the same story every year. It's just they put a different branding on it. I know I'm kind of this is not something you discussed because it's so recent, but I am curious about your take on in the news. There's been, Arab voters are especially in a swing state like Michigan right now. Many voters are saying that they will not vote for Biden again. They won't vote for Trump, but they'll probably either split a ticket or sit out, given Biden's support for the campaign of mass killing in Gaza. That's just another example for me that struck me with your book of the kinds of expectations that voters who are not in the white majority are supposed to bear, because it's actually it's perfectly rational, in my opinion, when you're a very small minority in this country and you don't feel your voice is being heard. And what choice do you have except to withhold your vote? But then when I have a conversation with liberals, it's all about, well, I mean, how could they? How could they? And white liberals, really. And there's that empathy gap there is so striking to me, because I think, to return to what you talk about, grief and grievance are so different, and there's many people in this country have no idea what it's like to feel as though their government is actually deeply antagonistic to them.
I think this is a really important point, right? So I think one of the things that happens is that, people, I think, don't really think about whose losses are visible and whose losses are immediately attended to and whose are not. And so for people who don't have their losses seen, there is this enormous added burden of, you have to make your loss visible. You have to tell your story. You have to try to humanize it so that people will care. And I think it's really enormously difficult for people to understand, like, what happens when it feels like your government, the state that should be protecting your interests, literally does not see or does not want to see the losses that your community is suffering. And also that it's really unfair to ask people to have to prove their humanity in some way for us to care about their losses, which is, something that I think we see in a lot of contexts right now, right? We see it with Palestinians, in Gaza, we see it with women who are being affected by abortion bans, who are having to come out and tell their stories. And I think it really is this issue that you're pointing to, where, it's like you say, it's perfectly rational for people to feel like, how can I support, an administration that I feel that is not listening to my concerns at all. And
right. But if it's a group of white people, right, in a diner again, that's valid. But right. Everyone else, but those, but groups that don't get that kind of coverage or are not a part of the us as in mainstream the mainstream kind of like U.S. like cultural thought or whatever, that kind of empathy is not extended. And I think your book does such a great job of exploring that topic. Really appreciate your time today, Juliet Hooker, professor of political science, Royce Family Professor of Teaching Excellence in Political Science at Brown University. The book is called Black Grief, White Grievance, The Politics of Loss. We will put a link to your book in the description wherever people are watching or listening to this. Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be speaking with Zachary Foster about his newsletter. We are back, and we are joined now by Zachary Foster, historian of Palestine. He received his PhD in Near Eastern Studies from Princeton University, proprietor of the Palestine in Your Inbox / Palestine Nexus newsletter. Zachary, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Everyone should follow Zach. Do you go by Zach or Zachary? What do you prefer?
Zach is great.
Zach, everyone should follow Zach on Twitter because, I've followed you for years, but especially in this moment, having your expertise as somebody who's studied Palestine in particular is very needed. And your work really is all about preserving Palestinian history, which, we spoke to Ilan Pappy on this program before, one of the Israeli new historians. We're just at the very beginning, I think, of a more mainstream, broader cultural understanding, historical understanding of what Palestinian history really, really is. And there are still efforts, though, to destroy that. I mean, every university in Gaza has been bombed at this point. One was a controlled demolition. So in terms of this moment for preserving Palestinian history, what are your kind of major goals and your overriding thoughts about this particular moment for your work?
Just to start with the problem statement, for more than a century, the Palestinian people have been completely erased from media in the United States. Going back long before World War II, there have been studies done showing that basically the Arabs don't exist. The Palestinian Arabs do not exist in Western media in the United States. The problem persists in the 1970s. A study came out in the publication Plus 972 a couple of years ago, showing how from 1970 to 2019, in the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Nation, and a couple of other publications, there was a lot written about Palestinians, but almost none of the articles published about Palestinians were written by Palestinians. In the New York Times, it was about 1%. So the Western media has basically left Palestinians out of the conversation. And so I think instead what you have is mainstream media, cable news, New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, all of the major publications that cover foreign affairs. They do not give Palestinians in the words of Edward Said, the Palestinians do not have permission to narrate. And I think it's my goal to bring Palestinians, Palestinian history back on the table. So my website, Palestine Nexus, we publish documents, collections of documents, the most recent of which is a collection called the Gaza Collection, which is, I purchased many hundreds of documents, probably about 600 documents total from an antique dealer in Gaza. And his name is Salim El-Rais. And he's a refugee now, struggling to survive just like everyone else in Gaza. But I was able to purchase many hundreds of documents from him. So we have the Gaza Collection. These are documents dating all the way back to the Ottoman period. Property records, business transactions, personal papers, letters, family papers that Salim El-Rais went around Gaza and collected. And so that is all available for free to download on PalestineNexus.com. And I think more generally, I think my goal is to try and make Palestine history more accessible to broader audiences. And so what I do in my writing, my newsletter, on Twitter, is to try to demystify this conflict, right? It's quote unquote complicated, as all of these Western experts would have you believe, but in fact, it's actually not that complicated.
It's really not. Yes. It's it's quite easy. It's was imperialism, colonialism in the past. This is the modern version of it, and it's kind of a test, I think, of our the arc of moral progress, as democratic politicians like to refer to it, as to whether or not we recognize it as the reality that it is. So, I mean, I'm going to pick your brain then on some of these things that you are archiving, and Middle Eastern history and Palestinian history in particular. So, for people that may be watching this for the first time and are not familiar with the history of the Palestinian people, Palestinian as an identifier, as a national identity, or a cultural identity. What are the first records of people identifying as Palestinian, and how that fit, I guess, into the broader Ottoman Empire as well?
Yeah, so the first instance of a Palestinian using that word in Arabic, Falastini or Falastiniyin, the plural, is in 1898. A guy named Khalil Beidas. He publishes a book. It's a translation of a Russian archaeologist's guide to the Holy Land. He translates it into Arabic, and he's using the word Palestinian to describe the Arabic-speaking inhabitants of Palestine, and he uses that word throughout the book. You also have articles coming by Najib Nasser and Salim Kobain in 1901. They're publishing articles titled "A Palestinian Describes a Palestinian Town" in Arabic, in a journal called El Jamia, published in Alexandria. But even actually before that, if you go already starting in the 1870s and 80s, you have actually many English, German, and Russian sources who are describing the people of Palestine as Palestinians. I think one of the common myths about the origins of the Palestinian people is that the Palestinians only started to identify as such in response to Zionist immigration and Zionist land purchases. That's a myth. These first Palestinians who started to call themselves Palestinians, why did they start to do that? Well, you have all of these schools opening up around the Ottoman Empire in the late 19th century, right? You have Ottoman schools, you have German schools, you have Russian schools. That's the school that Khalil Beidas went to, as well as Najib Nasser and Salim Kobain. So they're going to these schools. They're learning from textbooks called The History of Palestine, The Geography of Palestine. There are maps of Palestine posted on the walls. They're taken out of their home environments, and they're living in these boarding schools. Lo and behold, they start to, as well as being taken on trips around the Holy Land, visiting the holy sites in Jerusalem and Nazareth and wherever else. Lo and behold, by the first decade of the 20th century, they're all calling themselves Palestinians.
Right, and then the turn of the century happens. The Zionist project begins to kind of unfold at this point. There are the Balfour Declarations in 1917, but my understanding is that before that there were some Russian Jewish emigres that had begun moving to the area by that point as well. When did the Zionist project kind of begin in earnest, and how did that coincide with certain emigration to the area?
I think the first wave of Zionist immigration to Palestine traditionally is considered to be 1882. Maybe you could say 1878. But for the first 4 decades of Zionist immigration to Palestine, from the 1880s to World War I, you only get a few tens of thousands of Palestinians, a very small number. There's still less than 15%. On the eve of World War I, there's still less than 15%. 10
to 15% Palestinians, you meant Jewish immigrants, or emigres. Yeah.
Excuse me, apologies, I misspoke.
Just wanted to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the country, okay, so let's go back to 1870, sort of before Zionism. There is no Zionism in 1870. The land of Palestine is 85% Muslim, 10% Christian, 5% Jewish, roughly. By the eve of World War I, the Zionists have only a few tens of thousands of Zionists have immigrated to Palestine. The real uptick in Zionist immigration to Palestine does not happen until the 1930s. I mean, even as late as 1929, 1930, there's a big earthquake in Palestine. There's the disturbances of 1929. And even into the early 1930s, 1931, 1932, the Zionists are talking about how this project is failing. This project is not going as planned. There are not enough Zionists, are still less than 20% of the population. How is it you establish a Jewish country in a land that is 80% non-Jewish? Ask yourself that question. And by the way, all the Zionists did ask themselves that question. And they all, for the most part, almost every major Zionist thinker from 1880 to 1948 asked that question. And the majority of them landed on a similar answer, which was, well, these people, they have a strong national identity. They have deep roots in the country, and they're not going to leave voluntarily. And so there was basically only one real practical solution to solving the problem of the Arab question, as it was known then. It was transfer. That's how they called it back then. Now we would call that ethnic cleansing, which is exactly what happened in 1948. But to answer the question, yes, the real uptick in Zionist immigration did not happen until after 1933, right? It was basically when Hitler rose to power in Germany that you saw massive wave of Zionist immigration. In 1933 up until 1936, you get 30, 40, 50,000 Zionists immigrating to Palestine every year in the mid-1930s.
And at that point, I mean, what the Zionist project? How can you contextualize that within rising nationalism in the 20th century in Europe? Because based on my reading of some of your work, that's very central to understanding it. Because that nationalism also led us into in part into two world wars, but it was very much so at kind of the core of what Zionists wanted to do in what is now Israel.
That's exactly right. You have this ideology spreading around Europe in the 19th century called nationalism that says that all the peoples of Europe are nations, and thus they all need their own national homeland. And the Jews are basically left out of that project of nationalism, because the Jews in Austria are told they're not Austrians, they're Jews. And the French Jews are told, no, they're not French Jews, they're Jews. And the same is true in the Russian Empire. They're told they're not Russian Jews, they're Jews. And so they fail to integrate owing to the anti-Semitism and bigotry that they face in Europe. And so they ask themselves, okay, well, if we are Jews and we're not Germans and we're not French and we're not Russians, well, then what is our national homeland? And they settle on Palestine relatively quickly. They debate, there was a project to try and settle Jews in Sinai, in Argentina, and also in Africa, and I believe Uganda. But basically, very quickly, they realize that Jews won't actually move to those other places. Right. The only place that they can convince any number of Jews to move to actually try and build this Jewish state, this Jewish nation state, is in Palestine.
Right. And it really is these like European exports into the Middle East, one of nationalism based on that kind of identity, and then also colonialism, even though, of course, the Holocaust and the persecution faced by Jews in Europe and in Russia, as you say, is like the impetus for it. And it seems moral on its face within the context of what self-actualization or of what Jews were facing within that context, right? But then the context is, well, there were people living there, and here we go. We're going to just do a very European-style colonial nationalist project, but with all of this other kind of emotional weight behind it.
Make no mistake, the early Zionists, they saw themselves as colonizers. In fact,
they call themselves settlers, still to this day, by the way. But yeah,
to this day, I mean, really, in a very profound sense, one of the head of the Palestine office, the executive office in Palestine for the first decade and a half of the 20th century, Arthur Rupin. So he is born in Poland. And one of his first hire for that office is a German official who had previously worked in the German colonial administration that was in charge of transferring German citizens to Poland to try and create a German demographic majority in parts of Poland. And so he hired this guy. It's like, wow, this guy's perfect for the Zionist enterprise, because that's exactly what we're trying to do in Palestine, right? We're trying to transform the country from a demographic majority of Arabs, overwhelmingly, to a majority of Jews. So he hires this German colonial official into the Palestine office to help plan how you're going to actually transform the demography of Palestine. And then, of course, all of these Zionist institutions use that word, the Jewish Colonial Trust. the Zionist colonial trust, right? They're collecting money around Europe so that they can buy a plan in Palestine, right? The Jewish Colonization Society, they embrace as part of their self-conception is that they are colonizers. And in fact, they see themselves very much the same way that like Europeans saw themselves in South Africa and Australia and the United States. And they even draw very explicit comparisons to other European settler colonial movements.
Well, there's a reason that the Afrikaner government, before apartheid was overthrown, was very much joined at the hip with the Zionist project and the new government of Israel. I remember reading in the 70s kind of recently. But I guess now we can turn to 1948, the Nakba, the mass expulsion of Palestinians to create the Jewish state. What is the Nakba? What did that entail? And how did it lead to the creation of Israel and Palestine as we know it?
Yeah, so the Nakba is probably the single most important event, at least before 2023, in Palestinian history. It was the word itself just means catastrophe. It is used to describe the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Palestinians in 1948. And so just to back up a little bit, the British, they have occupied Palestine in 1920 and established this mandate for Palestine that lasts until 1948. And basically they decide after almost 30 years of colonial rule that this project has failed. It's time to go back home. And basically they declare that they're going to leave Palestine. And so and then the United Nations adopts this the partition plan in 1947, in November 1947. And immediately after that plan is proposed, you see violence between Jews and Palestinians in Palestine, kind of a civil war from November 1947 until the war lasts until almost the end of 1948, really November, December 1948. And it's during that period of time from November 1947 up until let's say November 1948, in which the Zionist forces, first, they adopt a plan. It's called Plan Dalet, and that plan is basically a blueprint for establishing a Jewish state. And how do you establish a Jewish state in a land that is majority non-Jewish? Well, you remove the Arabs. And that was that was quite explicit in the plan. It was anyone is hostile to the Zionist forces who go town to town in February, March, April, and May of 1940. They're going town to town. They're expelling Palestinians from their homes. You get 40,000 Palestinians expelled from Lid in 1948. There's massacres in Tantura on the coast. Then in the Galilee in the fall of 48, they go up and expel hundreds of thousands of more Palestinians into Lebanon and Syria. So basically, the Nakba it's not only the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, but also the entire destruction of Palestinian society. Remember, it wasn't just that they expelled the Palestinians from their homes. It was that then they destroyed the villages so they couldn't come back to them. And then on top of that, they destroyed 500 Palestinian villages during the war. And then I think really the real kicker is that after the war ended, they continued to expel more Palestinians from their homes. It wasn't like the war ended, okay, peace with the Palestinians. No. They continued to expel something like 36 more Palestinian villages were depopulated after November 1948. So in other words, after the war ended. And then in the 2 years following the end of the war, so basically from the end of 1948 until 1950, you had all these Palestinian refugees trying to come home. Right? As refugees so often do at the end of a war, you go home. And in their attempts to go home, they were overwhelmingly unarmed. They were trying to reclaim property, trying to reclaim lost land, trying to see family, trying to reclaim animals, harvest crops in some cases. More than 1,000 unarmed Palestinians were slaughtered in the year after the war, in the 1 to 2 years after the war. So I think this is why it was such a catastrophe, because not only do you have so many massacres during the war, not only do you have 750,000 Palestinians become refugees during the war, but then you have many thousands of Palestinians massacred even after the war itself.
Yeah, I mean it's the Nakba, my producer Matt just said it's a continuous and present process. That's I think a great way to put it. It's very eerie, right? What we're witnessing at this current moment, and the exact tactics that you described there. So the Nakba happens 1948. the partition plan goes into place. The next kind of real milestone is based on, you're the historian, but based on my understanding, is the 1967 borders, which Israel has been in violation of for decades at this point. That really marks the moment where Israel decided we are not gonna comply with kind of like any international boundaries set to try to contain this process. What happens in 1967 and after?
Yeah, so the June 1967 war, a war that you could say was a culmination of tension between, let's say, Egypt and Israel, as well as Syria and Israel, and Jordan and Israel. And this boils over into a war in which Israel conquers and occupies Gaza, Sinai, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem. And within a few weeks of the war's end, Israel annexes a massive swath of the West Bank, something like 70 or 80 square kilometers of basically the West Bank. It now calls East Jerusalem so that it can annex it. Within 2 weeks of the war's end, so we're talking June 18th, 19th, 1967, the Israeli cabinet makes a number of critical decisions. Number one, they decide that the eastern border with Jordan, so basically the Jordan River, is now Israel's eastern border. And that, which essentially means Israel made the decision to permanently occupy the West Bank indefinitely. They made that decision 2 weeks after the war ended. Okay, not even, maybe it was less than 1 week. They also decide that they don't really want Sinai, but they do want Gaza. And eventually, they make this. This is incredible that they literally. This was a decision made in 56 years ago. The Israeli cabinet decided, we want to annex Gaza, but we need to figure out a way of expelling its residents first. That was a cabinet discussion. That was a decision that was made in June 1967. So, basically the decision was made. We want the land. We don't want the people that live on it. That's a very important thing for the Zionists, right? You want the land because Zionism is all about Jewish flourishing, Jewish self-determination, Jewish prosperity, right? Well, how do you prosper and flourish? Well, you conquer more land and you settle more people on it. This is all, especially the kind of the historic homeland of the ancient Israelite kingdom, right? Judea and Samaria, right? So this is very much like part of the core of Zionism is kind of settling the land. So you got to conquer it, then you occupy it, and then you settle it. And what do you do with the Palestinians? Well, if you can expel them, great. If you can't expel them, well, push them into smaller and smaller areas. Crowd them into, push them from Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank, get them out of that land because that's the area Israel wants, push them onto Area A and B, which is only 40% of the West Bank, and then in Gaza, just keep crowding them into smaller and smaller areas, create a buffer zone, create Israeli settlements separating North Gaza from South Gaza. And that's basically what we've seen over the past 56 years.
So how much territory did Israel take in like the immediate aftermath of 1967 in violation again of the international borders drawn? And then when did like the West Bank and Gaza as the respective ghetto and open air prison of Palestinian people, / concentration camp, when did those kind of modern borders come to be?
Yeah, so in the immediate aftermath of the war, Israel, like I said, they annexed something like 70 square kilometers of the West Bank. They annexed it to Jerusalem and called it East Jerusalem, even though those villages were actually not part of Jerusalem before that period of time. And then they basically decide they're going to occupy Gaza and the West Bank indefinitely. And essentially over the course of the 1960s and 70s start to implement processes and procedures and then you get the permit regime and then you get the closure regime. But basically it's a 56-year long history of confiscating more land. Something like I don't recall the exact figures, but a vast majority of the settlements are actually built on privately owned Palestinian land. So you confiscate land in various ways. The most popular way by the 1980s was declaring it state land. So first you declared state land, and then you build settlements on it. And then in many cases you have to push Palestinians off that land to build those settlements. In certain cases, the Israeli army even used chemical weapons. They poisoned a well, and they poisoned wells in the 1970s because they wanted to build an Israeli settlement. I believe it was near Salfit in the West Bank. But in any case, so Israel is conquering, confiscating land, demolishing homes, They are stripping Palestinians of residency rights, pushing them. So, for example, in East Jerusalem, 15,000 Palestinians have been stripped of their right to live in East Jerusalem. Why? Well, I mean, because they're born of the wrong religion and of the wrong nationality. I mean, that's basically the reason. And the same is true in the West Bank and Gaza. Over the, basically from 1967 until 1987, they expelled 2,000 Palestinians from the occupied territories to outside. The same happens in the 90s. They try and expel 400 members of Hamas fighters. Hamas is carrying out all these attacks. And so they're like, oh, we know the solution. Let's expel all of Hamas to South Lebanon. By the way, that is a very tragic mistake on their part, because what ends up happening is Hamas and Hezbollah.
I was just about to say, how predictable. They join Hezbollah in Lebanon. Jesus Christ.
It's like exactly what happened with when the U.S. created all these prisons in Iraq after 2003, and basically it created these breeding grounds for ISIS in Iraq. The same is true with Israel. They push all these Palestinians out of Israel into Lebanon, or out of the occupied territories into Lebanon. And lo and behold, you have this kind of newfound alliance between Hamas and Hezbollah.
Which is convenient also for Israel, by the way. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. So basically, it's a 56-year-long history of taking over more land, destroying more Palestinian homes, destroying Palestinian olive groves, expelling Palestinians from out of the occupied territories, stripping them of their residency status, denying them the right to family reunification, denying them the freedom of movement, denying them the right to vote for the government that controls their lives, i.e. the Israeli military, imposing a military regime on them that has a conviction rate in the military courts of 99.7%. I mean, that is life for Palestinians for 56 years.
Yeah, I mean, and when you say that the number 56 years over and over again, I mean that is so important to note, because that has been the reality up until this point. When we're continuously talking about October 7th, I mean, it's purely based, really, on the poverty and the deprivation of the Palestinian people and the extreme amount of arms and weaponry and wealth that is sent to Israel, and propped up by, and also nuclear weapons, by the way, most likely. And that has made it so that, like, that's the deadliest attack in 56 years of occupation and seizure of land and deprivation of rights and mowing the lawn. That's all that happened. I mean, that is almost a minor miracle that more Israelis have not been killed in this way.
I think that, I mean, if you go back to 1948, 1956, and look at how it is that this organization Hamas even came about, right? In 1948, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the founder of Hamas, he was expelled from his home at age 12. The other founder, the other co-founder of Hamas, Abdulaziz Rantisi, in 1956, when he was an 8-year-old boy in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in Gaza, the Israeli army, in their neo-colonial war together with Britain and France, they reoccupy Gaza. They occupy the Gaza Strip. They enter the Khan Yunis camp on November 3rd, 1956, grab every male above the age of 15, line them up in the city center, and execute them. It was a massacre. 150 to 200 Palestinians were massacred. He bore witness to that. As an 8-year-old boy, his uncle was massacred. Lo and behold, 20 years later, in the case of Abdulaziz Rantisi, and in the case of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, something more like 30 or 40 years later, they found the organization that carried out the attack on October 7th. So, I mean, just imagine how many 12-year-old boys have been made homeless. How many 8-year-old girls are witnessing the horrific violence, 30,000 Palestinians slaughtered in 3 months, the starvation now that is setting in. We're talking about the Israeli army using starvation as a weapon of war right now. You're talking mass displacement, mass suffering, overcrowded shelters, diseases spreading rampantly. I mean, how many of the kids in Palestine today are going to grow up with the hatred that is going to lead them to carry out all kinds of attacks against Israel in the future? I mean, my goodness, how could they not? I mean, what is Israel doing right now? It's setting itself up for decades and decades more violence. I mean, it's just so tragic thinking about kind of what is, it's what has happened is tragic. Thinking about what will happen in the future,
exactly.
Is just, it's honestly difficult to even comprehend.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't even know updated death tolls right now because the entire health system in Gaza has completely collapsed. Their ability and the ministry too, their ability to get anything out there. I mean, the rolling blackouts. It's been over a week of communication blackouts. We don't know. I go by Euromed Monitor numbers because they also count the presumed dead in their figures, but. Even the 25,000 dead number that are confirmed by like morgues and hospitals, that's not the full figure, but it's also going to be higher, the official death toll soon, because the counting isn't even able to proceed in any way right now. Like we are witnessing, let alone the people that are going to be maimed and never be the same for the rest of their lives based on the injuries that they've suffered and the family that they have lost. I guess, I'll wrap up here with you, Zach, just because I kind of want to bring us to the present day. Tomorrow we will get the ICJ injunction essentially ruling, which is just the first the first kind of like emergency measure put in place if they're going to do it, as they go over the next few years and look into South Africa's genocide case against Israel. One of the refrains you'll hear from Zionists about the case for the genocide case is like, oh, well, look at this population explosion. I mean, you can't be genociding a people when their population continues to increase. Now, putting aside the obvious, I think, rebuttal to that, which is that South Africa isn't actually contending that the genocide began before October 7th. They were contending that the ethnic cleansing and the conditions before the act of genocide began set up the genocide that is happening right now. But even so, that straw man about the population increase, as a historian of Palestine, what's your response to that?
Anybody who talks about population increases in a conversation about genocide is actually telling you they don't know what the legal definition of genocide is, according to the United Nations Genocide Convention of 48. That's what they're saying, right? Because it's there are 5 things that this convention defines as acts of genocide, right? So acts to commit with intent to destroy in whole or part a group, including killing members of the group, causing them serious bodily harm, right? So, and then of course declaring your intent. Intent is very important. You have to declare intent. Another condition, another one of the 5 acts would be making basically conditions of life, conditions that basically where you can't live. When you describe what the Genocide Convention calls a genocide, and then you look at what Israel is doing in Gaza, it's a textbook case of genocide, exactly, according to Israeli scholar Raz Siegel. Literally, intent. How many pages of the ICJ case included statements made by senior Israeli political and military officials, starting from the prime minister, comparing the enemy to Amalek, the biblical people that the Israelites were instructed to destroy every man, woman, child, and ox of. You have the prime minister state not once but twice the enemy the enemy is Amalek, meaning you need to kill every single man, woman, and child. How much more direct evidence of intent to commit a genocide do you need? This is a textbook case. So you have the intent, then you obviously have making conditions of life impossible. So complete siege. There's hundreds of thousands. The birth
part, preventing births, the hospital attacks, the NICU babies decomposing. There's 5 planks of that Article 2, and Israel clearly meets 4 of them.
Exactly right. So I don't know what the ICJ will, how the ICJ will rule tomorrow. What I do know is that regardless of what term we use to describe this, it is among the most horrific acts we've ever seen in all of human history. We are looking at the complete destruction of an entire society. Something that people are describing. Not even World War II, not even the horrific scenes coming out of World War II are even comparable. We're talking about 90+% of the population made homeless. We're talking about, million+ people starving to death. As you and I have this conversation right now, 1 million+ people are starving to death.
Yep. I think the problem is just like the Zionist defenders of the Israeli government aren't even contending with facts. I mean, they're operating from a might meets right kind of perspective. And for someone like who's geriatric like Joe Biden and who cites Golda Meir as somebody who he deeply admires and how her conversation with him back in the Senate in 1973 changed his perspective forever. It's like, okay, so we're on sentimentality, we're on raw emotion, we're on a false kind of misguided desires to have reparations for the Holocaust at the expense of another population. It like these figures seem to be not getting home to people, and that's what's maddening. That's what's maddening. But
yeah, I mean, 100 days after October 7th, the president of the United States issues a statement in support and in sympathy with the Israeli victims and the Israeli victims only. I mean, the disconnect. Does he understand that 80% of young Americans call for a ceasefire? Does he understand that the 5 to 10 million American Muslims and Arabs are not going to vote for someone who's carrying on a genocide against the Palestinian people? Does he have any idea what he's doing? I mean, for his own self-interest, leaving aside the Palestinians.
I don't know. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here, Zach. But I really, if the audience hasn't gotten the sense already, Zach's newsletter is really, really important work, and archiving all of this is so essential. It's called the Palestine Nexus newsletter. You can sign up for it. You can read some of those documents that Zach outlined there for free on the website as well. We'll put a link to Palestine Nexus in the description wherever you're listening to or watching this. Zachary Foster, really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, and I hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Emma.
All right, folks. With that, we're going to wrap up the first hour, the free part of this program, head into the fun half. We'll just be with Matt Binder today and, of course, Matt Leck and Bradley. But on ESPN, we are going to be giving our picks as the competition tightens up against the spread and more. Maybe some props just to keep it spicy for divisional weekend. YouTube.com/ESPN show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning this weekend. Well, we got a whole bunch of things, so I'm not really sure. But Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, there will be a Sunday show. We have a number of interviews, including with Heidi Matthews on sexual violence, used as both as a justification for Israel's assault on Gaza, and a bunch of other stuff coming up. So Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
And we don't have Matt Binder yet, but we will soon. Check out Doomed and Scam Economy. Oh wait, there he is. There he is. We can bring him in and he can do his own plug. A reminder that the show relies on your support, folks. Please, if you can. New Year's always a little bit slower. People kind of cancel their memberships with their credit card at the end of the year somewhat. So, like, if you'd like to be a member, help us out, support our work, support interviews like we did today, join themajorityreport.com. It would be a very a good kindness to us, and you could IM the show if you are a member. Real Ace Attorney, speaking of an IMer, says Zach Foster should already be locked into the year and best of shows. Phenomenal interview. So let's write that down for best ofs. Thank you, Real Ace Attorney. Binder, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. What is going on with Doomed and Scam Economy?
Sure. So just yesterday, we had a pretty much crossover episode for both Doomed and Scam Economy because the episode fit both shows. I basically ran through a complete explainer of what was going on with Mr. Beast and X, and how Mr. Beast posting the results of his monetization test on Elon Musk's platform basically inadvertently showed the whole world that Elon Musk's monetization system to woo creators to X is completely rigged in the favor of whomever Elon Musk wants it to be rigged in favor
of.
Yes, shocking, I know. But it's extremely obvious and I go through a number of details that a lot of people didn't realize or know, including, I don't think, either he didn't let it on or he truly did not know. Mr. Beast doesn't seem to realize certain aspects of what he had going for him as well.
Okay, so who is Mr. Beast and why does anyone give a crap?
Okay, so Mr. Beast is the largest YouTuber.
We should do this in the fun
planet.
half. We should actually like do a segment on this. Probably.
Really?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, it's a big deal, I think, for people who. I mean, for politics,
he's like the
it's a
most
big deal
prominent
because if you
YouTuber,
care
honestly,
about
Mr. Beast,
yeah,
I would
he's
say.
the biggest
like,
YouTuber.
truly the most like successful by monetary and like exposure value.
I thought that was
YouTuber.
like Philip DeFranco.
No,
but maybe I'm stuck in like 2011.
Yes,
that's a
or that other the kid, the MMA guy, the blonde Jake Paul. I thought that was the guy. No, I'm behind.
They're combat sports
okay
participants now, the Paul brothers.
I'm behind the times, I
Jake's
guess.
a boxer and Logan's a pro wrestler.
Oh.
We should talk about it in the second half because it's a big deal even if you pay attention to politics because so much happens on Twitter/X and Elon Musk holds so much influence over the right wing now that what happens to his platform shapes a lot of the conversation.
All right, we will talk about it then. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabs.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Oh, right.
We are back. I have a quick plug to do. People might have remember we mentioned this on Tuesday, but Jamie, formerly of the Majority Report, Jimmy Peck, is in Los Angeles, and there is a show called Crime Wave going on at a warehouse location in downtown Los Angeles, where they send you the address when you buy a ticket, which sounds very cool. That's tonight, January 25th. Comedy 9 to 10 p.m. Indie Sleaze dance party to follow. The headliner for the comedy portion is The Woke Mob, which is Jamie and Jake Flores. And also Tony Boswell of Minion Death Cult, who I've had on Left Reckoning, will be DJing. So if you're in LA, and I'll put this up on the, let me get the OBS over here. You can buy tickets and find out which secret warehouse in Los Angeles this party's going. It looks like tickets $7.77 to $15.
I've always wanted to get invited to a party like that where they text you the address late or something.
Yeah.
I'm not cool enough.
Only in the movies and apparently Los Angeles.
HBO originals. Yeah.
I think of Eyes Wide Shut when I think of that, but I don't think that's going to be the kind of party.
That's kind of a washed reference for that.
I just watched it for the first time.
It's a great movie.
About like a few weeks ago. It's a great movie. It's a great movie.
It makes me think of
Emma's
girls.
living in the early 2000s apparently. Philip DeFranco is the biggest YouTuber.
Like, I thought you were going to say girls. Like Euphoria would be, I think, what kids say now.
Yeah.
And girls would be probably what my generation says, and you just went with the Eyes Wide Shut.
Yep. No, I meant for the party, the party that you don't know about. Whatever.
The masquerade or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's I'm stuck in like 2003 in so many ways.
Emma's going to recommend a young up and coming director by the name of Alfred Hitchcock next.
Yeah, incredible. All right, so let's so I don't know anything about Mr. Beast. Binder and Matt are going to explain it to me.
Before we get to Mr. Beast, let's do this other Twitter-related content.
Yeah.
So
this was, I guess, the other day. Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro had a conversation because Elon Musk tweeted something very anti-Semitic, endorsing a grace replacement theory kind of talking point, and this was early on.
She's been doing constantly.
Yeah, this was early on, kind of a few months ago, right after October 7th or soon thereafter, and the ADL, which is very pro-Israel, condemned Elon Musk. And then they walked it back, coincidentally, and Elon Musk showed up in Israel doing a tour of the apartheid regime, his favorite kind of regime, with Netanyahu. And I now see ads for Israel, like the government, paid ads all the time all over
PR
Twitter.
Blitz time, baby.
Yeah, they're covering up their genocide, and he's helping them. And so another moment, part of this effort was Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro having a conversation about Judaism. And Elon Musk does a George Santos.
Because raising the profile of the fact there's still dozens of men, women, and children.
Many. I checked before I came. So many hostages. I hope they're alive. I hope they come back.
So let's talk about the uptick in anti-Semitism more broadly. One of the things that's been hard to watch as a Jew, but also just as an American and a Westerner, has been the radical upsurge in anti-Semitic activity, just generally anti-Semitic sentiment.
Can you pause it, actually? That's kind of notable there, that he says as a Jew, but also as a Westerner. Can you go back for a second?
Yes,
because
we're seeing the alliance between Zionism and white supremacy before our eyes, folks.
Exactly. That is really what's operating here, because there are many Jewish people, many, who are in staunch opposition to Israel's actions and war crimes in Gaza and are leading the charge in terms of activism here in the United States in opposition to it. So the second part of what Shapiro says is really what is kind of driving this.
Hard to watch as a Jew, but also just as an American and a Westerner, has been the radical upsurge in anti-Semitic activity, just generally anti-Semitic sentiment, appallingly, after October 7th. It's been astonishing, actually.
Yes, and I must admit to being somewhat, frankly, naive about this. In the circles that I move, I see almost no anti-Semitism. And there's this old joke I've got, like, this one Jewish friend. No, I have, like, 2/3 of my friends are Jewish, okay? I have twice as many Jewish friends as non-Jewish friends. I'm like Jewish by association. I'm aspirationally Jewish. So I don't, I was like, what are people talking about with this anti-Semitism? Because I never hear it when at dinner conversations. It's like an absurdity, at least in my friend circles. But when, looking at the pro-Hamas rallies in vast numbers that took place in almost every major city in the West, blew my mind. And including on the elite college campuses that are supposed to be.
All right, this is just right-wing pablum, but I wanted to get to his literal quote where he does the Santos thing. Bradley has that teed up. He returns to it and speaks about his name. I guess Shapiro kind of brings it up. These two guys don't have the easiest rapport, in my humble opinion. Here we go.
Of some sort. So you mentioned earlier, that you're aspirationally Jewish, that you surround yourself with, that you're surrounded by so many Jews. So are you part of the Jewish conspiracy? What exactly is the...
Maybe.
That'll please the haters online.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Easy conversation.
I grew up around a lot of Jewish people. I went to Hebrew preschool, Rachel Spiro in South Africa. My name is very Jewish.
I will tell you that for the past 10 years, people have assumed in my community that you were Jewish until I informed them otherwise. Elon is a pretty Jewish name.
He's super Jewish.
Yeah.
And then I went to Israel when I was 13. Visited Masada.
I'm a white apartheid.
I'm certainly checking the boxes on a lot of things. Like I said, most of my friends are Jewish, just worked out that way. So sometimes I guess maybe I forget. Am I Jewish? I'm Jewish. Aspirationally Jewish.
So, when...
Great job, Ben.
So, yeah, he really held his feet to the fire there. If it was anyone that wasn't servicing Ben Shapiro's pro-Israel right-wing political agenda in this moment, and this wasn't some sort of awkward, panel fluff piece situation. If somebody had said, I kind of wish I was Jewish, I'm aspirationally Jewish, my name sounds a little Jewish-y, which is literally what George Santos did when he lied about having family that died in the Holocaust, Shapiro would probably call that anti-Semitic. But Elon Musk, he's running cover for the Israeli government. That's the thing is like, you can be in right-wing circles right now, the biggest anti-Semite on planet Earth. You can tweet in favor of great replacement theory rhetoric. But as long as you say, hey, Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people's totally cool with me, come on over, says the Ben Shapiro Zionist types.
I mean, Ben Shapiro's a guy who was saying Steve King is not a racist. He is is eager to get in alliances with white supremacists. That's actually his business model.
Yep.
Did you see the slideshow that started the presentation?
I did not.
The whole panel. There was a slideshow before the whole that was like a presentation to open up the panel that made the claim that the Holocaust would have went down differently if Elon Musk's Twitter was around back then.
Oh my God, he did a Justin Bieber and Frank would have been a believer.
Or I usually go with the Mark Wahlberg 9/11 would have went down differently if I was on one of the planes. Yes, and in fact, part of the presentation was showing fake tweets that showcase how tweets would have looked.
What?
During the Holocaust. Let me find the video. It's very disturbing. Yes.
It's at the beginning of this presentation?
Yeah, but someone, the guy who helped make it, or paid to make it or whatever for the presentation, he uploaded like the raw thing. Like this is just like, I believe this video just shows it on the monitor, so you don't see it as good as you do in this unbelievable. Yeah, hold on. Let me pull it up. It's really, really unbelievable. I mean, it's part of the course, I guess, what you expect from these guys. They're so delusional that they think they're not only on the right side of things, they are making allies with the people who are actually perpetuating and helping spread anti-Semitism.
Yeah, who would have thought? While you're looking for that, Binder, I just wanted to post. This is my favorite part of this. It's maybe I'm imagining this, and maybe I'm imagining Ben Shapiro's getting a little bit uneasy about the fact that he's doing laundry for a Afrikaner white supremacy nostalgic on behalf of the state of Israel here. But Elon, he keeps calling X Twitter. And you can tell that's all Elon is getting listening to when he's asked this frankly stupid question from morons.
If we're going to count our flaws, we should also count our blessings.
Yeah.
Oh,
One of the things that I think is amazing about what you've been doing, Elon, is that it's not just the business side of you that's important. Obviously, you've become this unbelievably large figure looming in the public imagination, and that means that when you tweet, it has impact that is very large. How do you decide when to tweet? Sometimes it's memory, sometimes it's joking, sometimes it's these long thought out posts. How do you decide when to tweet? How do you inform yourself on the topics that you're tweeting about?
Tweet.
Well, I do post a lot on the X platform.
Post a lot on the X platform. Go ahead.
I know. I watched that clip too, and he's obsessed with his follower count. He was like, 160 plus million people follow me, so I must have something funny to say. When, bro, I just pointed out that you just did the George Santos bit from like 6 months ago, and you think you're so creative. I've never seen such a brazen display of billionaire freaking rich guy privilege than the fact that this guy gets to walk around and think that he has anything remotely humorous to contribute to the world.
And I love Ben Shapiro, who's like a philosopher or something, according to the New York Times, but trying to be subservient and like a supplicant courtier, be like, oh, you're very smart in the things you say. But really, at the entire time, you're like bending the knee saying how genius this moron is. You're misbranding the thing that he's really eager to brand anew.
Exactly. Well, that's why I will be a part of the resistance and keep calling it Twitter. This is what Binder just sent to us. Do we have it here? Yeah, we want to read. These are. I can't see it. So
today at the Auschwitz death camp, EJ Association screened a short clip I made to Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro under the title, "If we had X in 1939, how many lives could have been saved?" Okay, yeah, I don't know how good this is going to translate to us playing this.
Right.
But our ship just left the Romanian coast and is going to Haifa. These are just like fake tweets about Jews escaping.
It's a stupid imagination of.
This is, I mean, it's offensive. I would think a lot of people would find that offensive. But you know what actually disproves this entire thing?
Right now.
You know what disproves this entire freaking thing? Is that they're doing this right now as a genocide's unfolding on the Twitter platform, being posted right before our very eyes, and they don't care. So I got news for you, Elon. Your platform actually wouldn't have done crap in in the genocide of Jewish people in the Holocaust. And again, it got to the point of 6 million Jews exterminated by the Nazi regime. But genocides we better pray that we are not like in a place historically where we can get to a point where millions of people can be exterminated under our very eyes. But tens of thousands are being right now in Gaza, and they're downplaying it. So like actually your platform, we kind of have a decent analogy right now with the genocide unfurling before our very eyes, and they're cheering it on.
Right. The whole idea that the posts would have done something is also the idea that like people in Nazi Germany just didn't know what was going on to the Jewish people inside these camps, which is not true. And so just like, again, the analogy, like you just pointed out to Gaza, we know what's going on there. And there are many people rightly speaking out against it, but there are also many people, mostly, unfortunately, people in power who are defending it or turning a blind eye or actually helping perpetuate the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah. Our techno-capitalists, are helping facilitate it just like they did back then. I mean, ask IBM if it's proud of what it was doing in 1939 and if it helped save anybody.
Yeah. I mean, just look what Elon Musk did right there on that panel, as tens of thousands of people are dying, being slaughtered, killed, many women and children being killed in Gaza. What is Elon Musk on stage talking about? Oh, there were so many pro-Hamas rallies in the U.S. I was just,
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break. Give me a break.
I mean, Tesla.
That's the free speech billionaire there for you.
Yeah, Tesla just literally did a light show in Israel with its Teslas to advertise. German car companies were also supplying machinery and vehicles to the Nazis during that time period. So it's amazing. I mean, Henry Ford was very sympathetic to the Nazis as well. So Elon Musk is actually quite keeping in the tradition of capitalist car guys that are sympathetic to fascist forces. I
mean, X would have actually been great for like Hitler and Mussolini to spread their word even further than they could have ever even imagined back then.
Totally. All that's our more
serious Twitter
Twitter segment. Now onto this. Binder. Mr. Beast, this is my guess, okay? So you can inform me as you inform the audience. He has a beard. He's white. That's what I know. I've seen a photo. And he gives away, like, cars and money. That's all I know. And now I know that it seems like he has a relationship with Elon Musk. What is this? What's going on? And can you explain it to me?
Right. So like you said, Mr. Beast is a big YouTuber, but that even downplays it. He's probably the biggest YouTuber. He's got like more than 30 million subscribers. His videos make millions of dollars. He has his own very popular line of chocolate. He had his own he has his own burger chains. He's very big deal.
And Binder, can you just remind folks what his first sort of content that made his name was?
Right. So what put Mr. Beast on the map was he did a live stream where he counted from 1 to, I believe it was 1 million. He counted to a very high number live on stream and did not stop till he was done. And that's what put him on the map. And since then, he's done all sorts of these like sort of stunts. Like he's not a prank YouTuber.
100,000 like might have been,
yeah, but he does like, you know, he did after Squid Games was a big hit for Netflix. He did his own version of Squid Games. You know, one of his big things is he puts like, he challenges people to like live for 30 days or something in a grocery store without any access to the outside world. And if they do so, they get, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000.
Okay. So he
does
like
all sorts of random things like that.
Yeah,
original stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And so, right. So Elon Musk really wants to sort of paint X as going through these growing pains as a scrappy startup does, because this $5 billion a year company is now making less than half of that and is struggling and has lost many advertisers. So Musk's big vision for Twitter is that it starts to compete with YouTube and TikTok and becomes a video platform. And to do that, you need actual people uploading video. And on top of that, you need actual people who viewers watch uploading their videos. And, you know, Mr. Beast would be one of the biggest gets. And so Musk has been dropping in people's replies, telling them to upload their content directly to X. And Mr. Beast is one of the people he's done that to. And originally, as recent as like December 30th, 2023, Mr. Beast was like, no, I can't do that. My videos cost a lot of money to make, and I don't think I can make as much on X. And then lo and behold, around 2 weeks later, on January 15th, Mr. Beast does upload a video directly to X. It's an older video that's been on YouTube for months, but he uploads it directly nonetheless and says he's doing this as a test to see exactly how much he can make on Twitter.
Okay.
And Elon Musk shared the video to his 169 million followers. The official X account shared the video. Users started reporting that they were seeing the video constantly pushed in their feed. And on further investigation, it turned out that the feed, Elon Musk's, Mr. Beast's video wasn't organically being recommended. It was actually being pushed into people's feeds as an unlabeled advert.
So he's trying to court this guy by rigging the algorithm in his favor, basically.
Allegedly. Now, Musk has seen one of my reports on this and replied to a user who screenshotted the headline saying, "To the best of my knowledge, there has been nothing done to help boost Mr. Beast." Yes, to the best of his knowledge. That sounds like a very full-throated, outright denial. But nonetheless, that's his statement. So fast forward to earlier this week, about, I believe it's 5 or 6 days after the video was originally uploaded, Mr. Beast did what he promised to do and shared how much money he made from X. And the grand total in that week from that one video was over $263,000. That's a lot of money. Now, the funny thing here is
unsustainably large amount of money, it seems like to me.
Yes, that would be roughly $1 million to a single person for one video every month. Around that, granted, the video views will drop off as it's up there longer, but give or take, let's even go with $500,000 a month for one video. That's
okay.
But here's the thing: X creators, people who subscribe to X Premium, the subscription service to get the verification badge, the Musk fanboys and the right-wing simps of Musk, they're pissed because they obviously have never made that much. Now, some of them make tens of dollars a month. Some of them make hundreds of dollars a month. Some of them make thousands of dollars a month. But even like the Krasensteins, who were pulling in at one point $10,000, $20,000 a month from Twitter, that's still, many worlds away from Mr. Beast's $263,000 in 1 week. So all of these people were sort of upset. But the thing... and Mr. Beast even said in his post that, like, sharing the results, that, like, this is a fluke, likely. He even called it a facade, which is really funny because I'm sure Musk didn't pay $250,000 for Mr. Beast to call it a facade. But he said, a lot of advertisers were fighting for, the pre-roll ad space before the video. And so there was always ads on his video and there was a lot of attention around it. So this probably isn't replicable by just any other creator. And he's right. Those all definitely worked in Mr. Beast's favor. But what people weren't really reporting, and even the Musk simps weren't realizing, was that Mr. Beast didn't share revenue from the creator monetization program that Musk created. The one that all those right-wingers and meme accounts and the Tesla fanboys are making those. Yeah, like, basically that program is you have to pay Twitter to subscribe to the subscription platform. Then you could apply for monetization. And even then, you only get revenue share for ads that show up in the replies to your tweet when people actually click your tweet and open it as a full page to read the comments. And then even on paid revenue share views only count for views from other X Premium subscribers. So if people aren't subscribed, the vast majority of Twitter users, their views don't count towards monetization for your content. And then even on top of that, the monetization is doled out from a predetermined monthly pool, which my guess is that pool comes from the revenue Twitter makes from people paying for the subscription. So, it sort of sounds like a pyramid / Ponzi scheme, but that's just my guess there. Because why else would you have a pool? Why wouldn't you just have a percentage of revenue that comes in from all the advertisers, like, YouTube does, for example? You don't need to have a predetermined pool if you're just basing it off of how many advertisers you have and the revenue that comes in from that. But I digress. But what Mr. Beast did not share is that this whole thing with him trying to figure out how much just any old creator can make on X. And so that was his test. And, Musk constantly saying X is the great equalizer and all creators are seen equally and they'll get paid for their content. What nobody shared is that Mr. Beast's revenue is from a program that Twitter has called Amplify. This is a program that existed well before Musk came along. It still exists under Musk's X, but the rules have not changed. And those rules are, it is an invite-only program that pays only the biggest publishers a percentage of revenue based on those pre-roll ads that play before your videos. And if you look at the Amplify page on Twitter/X, it's the same page that's basically existed for years. It tells you that only around 200 plus publishers are in the program and getting paid. So Mr. Beast got paid all that money from a extremely exclusive program that's invite only and only pays out to the largest publishers and creators on the planet, thus basically showing that like Mr. Beast's sort of results are rigged in a way that only X and Musk could have done. If he wasn't invited into that program, that very exclusive program, he could not have made that much money through the regular X monetization program. And so, the whole system from the promotion of his content to the specific program he was invited into that would dole out even that much money to someone, the entire thing was rigged in his favor by X and Musk.
So it was smoke and mirrors. I mean, the result that I'm interested in is this one, which is Dan Bongino and others being like, I love what Elon's doing with Twitter. Simps.
But
just simps. As I've repeatedly and publicly stated, but this is shady. I have almost 5 million followers. I mean, kick the tires on those, Dan. Followers here, and I signed up for monetization to see what the income stream looks like. And this is the type of payment received from Twitter. Disclosure: I am an investor in Rumble, but I want all parties. Oh, interesting. He's an investor in Rumble, so he said he got $379.
$379. That's hilarious.
Yeah. That's about a little bit away from the 263,000.
Little bit.
But keep tweeting, Bongino. Maybe he'll get there someday.
Yeah, grind harder, pussy.
He doesn't have that grind set. He doesn't know how to count to 1 million.
Some people like to complain, and others just like to work hard and have success, Dan. So sorry that Mr. Beast is willing to be work harder.
Right. The funny thing is, like, so many of these guys are whining because they're finding out the same thing that they find out on these other platforms, and Musk has to try to lightly explain it to them. You'll see him constantly do it to them. Why aren't I getting paid more? Why aren't more ads showing up in my content? And Musk has to jump in and say, our advertisers are choosing not to advertise on the specific type of stuff that you put out there. And they're like, but still, it should not matter. Free speech. I can write whatever I want. And he's like, but so find advertisers that will advertise on your content and we can pay you for it. He's learning the hard way exactly what all these other platforms go through, when he was also attacking those other platforms for, X will monetize your far right-wing content that, attacks black people and for DEI, and it attacks women who want to control their bodies, and it attacks LGBTQ people. We'll monetize your content. And then he finds out that advertisers, even the advertisers that stick around, don't want their stuff showing up directly on that content. And then he's forced to try to explain that to them, and they still yell at him for it. It's pretty funny to see.
That's pretty
hilarious.
Funny
cycle.
All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from an 810 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me?
Not well, if you don't mind putting...
Now, hold on. Hold on. Let me...
Sounds a little better now.
Just 1 second here. Shondo.
You got 5 seconds.
Can you hear me better?
Well, not really, but try to.
Hear me better?
There you go. A little bit better.
I can hear you now. There you go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name's Jacob from Flint, Michigan.
Jacob from Flint. What's on your mind?
Did you guys happen to get anything from Gretchen Whitmer's State of the State address yesterday?
I saw a little bit of it on Twitter, but nothing that we pulled for the show.
I thought a lot of the substance in what she was saying was really good. It was a really corny speech. She's kind of got like this Midwest white suburban mom vibe to it.
Totally.
But yeah, I thought the substance of everything she was talking about was really good. I think she highlighted a lot of like the things that Michigan has done, like repeal right to work and
oh, nice.
Universal school lunches for children, right? But other things that she wanted to do, she proposed to her legislature of a universal pre-K that she wanted to do. I think currently only 10,000 kids or something get access to that in Michigan, so she wanted to make that universal. Another one I thought that was huge was a universal community college for everybody, because currently I think in Michigan they have like the Reconnect program, which is like if you're 21 or older, you can go back to school for free at community college, but they wanted to do she wants to do every high school graduate now can just go to community college for free, which I thought was really huge.
Really huge. She's also going to run for president. I mean, you got to see it through that lens too. Like, not to take away from anything at all, but that's encouraging, one, that she feels like that's kind of the table she wants to set for Michigan, but also for a presidential run in 2028.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I agree with that. I agree with that too. But I think what her and like a bunch of just Michigan Democrats in general are really like setting the stage of what Democrats should be doing if you have like a majority in all your state legislatures. Is it's like go hard on all these like social programs, like why not? Who's going to stop you? And it's only going to benefit you in the polls and at least in your state, right? Because at this moment, a lot of people talk about like Palestine and Gaza and Israel and stuff like that. And obviously a lot of people in Michigan do not like Joe Biden for that. But she, interestingly enough, has like avoided that issue like the plague, in my opinion. I don't think she's spoken on it once. It doesn't seem like the Democrats are like divided at all in Michigan about it. So that's a really interesting thing.
It's an interesting way she's positioning herself. And you could see it also in the vein of what Tim Walz has been doing as well. Some of these Midwestern Democratic governors are doing, I think, good things and learning some lessons from very aggressive Republican state legislatures in the past and governors. So appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
You too. All right. Calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hi. This is Stephen calling from Alabama.
Stephen from Alabama. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, okay. The biggest question I wanted to ask, I love the show. I followed Sam and all you guys for years, and you're wonderful. And especially, I'm so grateful to you for bringing so much attention to the Gaza issue.
Thank you.
It's just so striking to me that, especially Emma, you've really, just your way of putting it, it just helps it to break through kind of on an emotional level of how I don't know what to say. It's just so hard to even verbalize. Like in the interview you just did, the depth of the atrocity of what's happening. And I just, so many people it just seems like it so clearly shows what a large segment of so-called liberal people on that issue of Israel just have these blinders on. And I guess my question...
Thank you, though, for the kind words, Stephen.
Thank you. Well, with all the supposed sophisticated surveillance technology and expertise of the Israeli military, does it make any sense, even if you were to take them at their word that they're going after Hamas, wouldn't it make more sense that they would target specific Hamas leaders? Or would it be that hard for them to find them and target them rather than just killing
No, because I mean,
innocent children.
Some of the Hamas leaders are in Qatar right now, and like openly,
exactly right.
Openly
I've heard
so.
you say that.
Right. So
doesn't that just put to lie the whole? I mean, it's just incredible to me that people can not see that. An average sort of, normie.
I
Democrat
know. I mean, I think. Binder, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
Oh, yeah. I think you're right. I think Sam reminds me of this because I'm just I wake up and I think about Gaza and I go to sleep and I think about Gaza. So I'm just like really steeped in it. But most people aren't paying that much attention. Like most people are not. Young people are, right? And I think just by the nature of us being a left of center, progressive show, whatever you want to call it, we're going to be more invested in it than the average human being. But people were barely invested in the Iraq war at the beginning. And so, like, this isn't even involving any U.S. troops now.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, somewhat, but
it is hard because it challenges you on a deep level to go along as if everything is fine and life is normal when you know what's happening. And so I kind of understand the impulse to turn away and just block it out.
I know.
And I find that just generally people I work with there's just so little attention to what's happening in the world, even the United States or definitely internationally. It's just amazing that we live and we can be so hypnotized into this. Yeah, but
I mean, cable news is barely talking about it.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm a cable news kind of junkie, and I'm ashamed to admit in a way, but like Morning Joe, they were really pro the Israeli response. I don't know if they are so much. They don't seem to talk about it as much.
Right.
But they went right along with that line of if you're anti-Semitic, if you don't think that Israel should just do whatever they want to do.
Well, Mika Brzezinski's father, you should look up what.
Yes, I mean, I somewhat know who he is. But.
Yeah, what some of his foreign policy was, and also Joe Scarborough is a former Republican congressman. So
Republican, yeah. And I remember when they used to have.
But they're both on MSNBC. What?
now they're just all about fear around Trump's, which is understandably. But I remember they would have him on and say, "Oh, he's in on the joke, and he's just this," They would have him on their show and be pal around with him, and now they act like they. I mean, that's a whole other thing. I mean, Republicans, they don't take responsibility for how they laid the groundwork.
Like the early promoters of Trump. They were inviting Trump on before anyone even took his campaign seriously when he first announced. I remember because I was working somewhere at the time. I was working somewhere that was constantly grabbing any sort of video we could of Trump to do, edits of it and stuff. And the number one place to go in those early days, you have almost daily content from Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski because they were there for him.
What's ironic is they still focus on him so much. I think that's one reason Tiffany Cross was canceled out because she didn't want to just do 24/7 Trump. But now it's in a negative way. It's like, fear, which I don't know if that's good or, I don't think we should ignore Trump, but I think in a way they almost give him more power by focusing on him so much.
I hear you.
But he's just like, he's like catnip for media.
100%. Well, appreciate the call, Stephen. Have a good day. All right.
Thanks, you guys. Love you guys.
Love you too. Bye. All right. Let's do a clip here, shall we? What do we have? Oh, I'll wait for Matt to get back. Actually, let me read some IMs. I want to do the Greta thing because I just want to wax poetically about her. So, what did you have? We'll do did you want to do the crypto sound? Oh, dang it. We just lost Binder. Okay. While we're figuring that out, I will read some IMs. Nola Birdwatcher. Howdy, folks. Just want some insight on book/documentary/journalists or articles I can brush up on to understand more about the situation at the border. I'm from Louisiana, as my name alludes, and the border rhetoric is a new battle I'm fighting down here. I love your coverage and insight, but I don't want to just parrot what y'all are saying and understand the history of the damage the U.S. foreign policy has done to our southern neighbors is the main goal. Thanks, y'all. Left is best. The question
That was weird.
Yeah, you got
Ping. The service we use actually signed me out, and I had to sign back in. That's the first time that ever happened.
Yeah, interesting. Matt, what's some good books on the border? We're being asked, like on border policy and how our foreign policy has contributed to it. If you have any off the top of your head.
One that's come out in a number of editions now. Peter Andreas Border Games would be a good overview one. There's a few others, but that's the first one that I can think of off the top of my head.
That sounds good. So Border Games, that's the recommendation.
Basic idea is that this is the idea that we have ever had a impermeable border.
Yeah.
Is a fiction meant to sell government contracts to border contractors and things like that. And like we said earlier, it basically has just driven up the price that the black market is able to, ironically, probably making this fentanyl stuff worse because it's basically a subsidy to illegal actors, and then they're able to also move other things illegally, like fentanyl. So yeah, I would check out Border Games by Peter Andreas.
Odd hominem. What combo's more cringe? Shapiro interviewing Musk or Greenwald interviewing Jones? I immediately thought of Greenwald interviewing Alex Jones and calling him handsome. It was nauseating.
Especially in the context under which he did that, which is with the decision looming with regards to Alex Jones and what he's doing with regards to the Sandy Hook families. Yeah, that was much grosser, I think.
And just because also, like, I don't have any respect for Elon Musk or Ben Shapiro.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
I once had like a good amount of respect for Greenwald.
Shapiro's just doing what he does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's another good recommendation in the chat by Jeffrey B. Border and Rule by Harsha Walia, who we should have on this program actually.
Christo, and then there's Deborah Messing. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I did see what she Instagrammed, which was mocking one of the journalists leaving Gaza for their own safety. And I'm not proud
Crazy
of
person.
what immediately first came to my mind when I saw that, but I'll leave it at that.
Don't get us banned.
I had a lot of anger when I'm not gonna get you guys. I'm not gonna get us banned, but I've thought about what I would do if I saw her in person.
Oh, she went to Israel and she took a bunch of photos with that far right wing UK guy who's super pro Israel.
It's so unsafe there though, Binder. I don't know why you're not respecting how unsafe it is right now in Israel.
That Douglas Murray guy, she was snapping photos with him, like they were big fans of each other. It was pretty amazing to see the staunch Hillary supporter / Democrat palling around with the guy who wrote the book about like Western chauvinism, like the West is better than Islam and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's a horrible person, horrible human being, horrible person.
He's also a twit. Like that guy is the embodiment of any kind of sort of masculine patriarchal order. Okay, buddy.
Let's do this Greta thing. So Greta Thunberg, or whatever how you say it. I heard her say that was how it was pronounced on Democracy Now, and I keep trying to do it, but everyone looks at me like I'm crazy, so I'm going with Thunberg. Regardless, like, she is just so impressive to me, and I think maybe Matt, you made this point for the first time I heard it, and I just keep repeating it because it's so true. She really could have gone down a very different road when she kind of exploded in popularity as this climate justice activist, and she could have become a liberal green energy person.
There's tons of those. A lot of people went down that
exactly
road.
The context with which she comes up, like not just like in the neoliberal West, but also like Germany, and the type of attention she's got from, was it Der Spiegel that had like a very strange, written by multiple authors, essay on how she's standing up for Palestine because she wants to stay popular? Like,
yeah, I mean,
crazy stuff.
But like the fact that she has been now for months vocal alongside her climate activism in favor of Palestinian rights. It's just a really, I think, encouraging sign, I think, for the future of climate activism and her section of it, right? Where young people see these things as interconnected, as, you know, you can't have climate justice on occupied land, is what many of the protesters alongside her say, and that the effects of colonialism, the effects of war, are intrinsically linked to the climate movement as well.
And I would recommend looking at like Jimmy Dore's coverage of Greta and how his basic rule toward any sort of young activists is that they're not focused enough on class issues, which he thinks is just like hating Democrats, and they do too much woke other stuff. But this is actually like what needs to be encouraged, is the ability to stand up across issues and build a broader alliance for all of these things. And yeah,
real progressives do gold ads now, like Jimmy Dore's been doing, apparently.
Silver ads.
Yeah,
silver ads. I'm sorry.
It's even more scammy. It's even more scammy.
He hasn't attained the gold level yet of Glenn Beck. He needs to stick with the silver till he attains that level of grift, I guess.
Exactly. But this was Greta in Germany. She's Swedish, but she was doing some climate action there, speaking about what's happening in Gaza.
We cannot remain silent. No one can remain silent when there's an ongoing genocide and when people are denied the most basic human needs. We must always stand up and speak up against oppression, against imperialism, against war, and against discrimination and racism in all forms. To stand with Palestine is to be human. We cannot allow ourselves to be silenced. So thank you for being here, and thank you for continuing to protest, speaking up, boycotting, and do everything that you can to raise your voice for Palestine.
You know, it is pretty amazing, because like her type of activist is what the mainstream would call traditionally like a radical activist, whatever it is they were, doing activism for. And usually those types would not get the coverage that she gets. But because she was so young and she was this school-aged white girl doing this very sort of viral thing with the sign and skipping school on a Friday every week or something like that, she got attention for that. And you gotta believe they thought that with that attention, she would end up becoming exactly what we were talking about before, the mainstream liberal, play within the system, play within the rules, and that's what they would get. But they got Greta as she is. And it is amazing because she's not something that has never existed before.
Yeah.
It's just that type of activist never gets the attention because they're actually the type of activist who's dangerous to the status quo.
Let's be real too, right? Like we just passed Martin Luther King Day. You know, his radical activism is completely watered down in the way that we view him in the United States. But he was somebody who was not just an activist for love or for racial equity.
Well,
I mean, he also was, at the time of his death, a very vocal anti-war activist and somebody who wanted to expand the social safety net as a part of his war on poverty and saw all of these things as interconnected. And so like radical activism is at its strongest when it incorporates all of those elements.
I mean, the funny thing about the MLK like polling thing is everyone it's like a truism. Everyone knows he had bad polling towards the end of his life. What people don't realize is that he had better polling earlier, and the bad polling was a result of him making alliances and doing things with like more Black Power aligned movements and making white people nervous, which is frankly exactly what Greta's doing when she's talking about Palestine, and the German press is freaking out about it and trying to pathologize her for it.
Yeah, and I just also want to add too, like when she first came on the scene and she spoke about her autism as her superpower. I thought that was such a wonderful like display of just I don't know, shining light on her diagnosis and how it can be this way for her to be like focused on the issues that she's an expert in and not really. I think it allows her, and I don't want to speak for her, but she said this in her own words, that it allows her to focus, and she's not going to be somebody who is distracted by BS propaganda about something like Gaza.
For instance, the newspaper is saying that she's doing secret terror support with autism octopus toys.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, she it's empowering, I think, for people who are neurodivergent. It's wonderful that she is able to kind of broadcast that and be a voice for people in that way. And also the fact, too, that she has very consciously worked with climate activists in the global south that come from that area. She's conscious of her whiteness and like being a Swede and how that kind of gave her an elevated platform. So, I mean,
and it's tough. Like,
she's the coolest person alive, arguably, right now. That's my take.
I see a lot of these like younger folks, like from a generation younger, and it is tough, especially if you get a platform in your late teens, early 20s, to like keep your bearings in this sort of environment, because you're going to have all these sorts of people who are going to try to influence you on certain issues and give you the right way of thinking on this. And you see it go wrong in certain ways where, domestically, I think the Democratic Party does really bad when they get involved with like activists.
Yeah.
I think they end up breaking their brains a little bit. And so like, I'm glad to see that, that Greta is, I mean, it's been very impressive, her arc in the past few years.
It's super clear that octopus scandal, quote unquote, early on was meant to try to shut her down on this.
And that's what they call in baseball, a little bit of chin music.
Yeah, and it's very clear that whether she recognized that or not, she doesn't give a shit, and she continued, which is great.
Totally. All right, this is a crypto story, so I had saved this for you, Bender, and we just got to get to it really quick.
It's great. I saw Molly White, who is fantastic. She runs Web3 is going great. She put together I think she's the one who put together the shortened version of this, but she's the first person I saw even mention this.
Yeah.
So if you're ever involved in something shady with crypto that you end up, a lot of people end up looking at you and thinking like, what the hell, man? You can pretty much just sort of wiggle your way out of this, apparently, by saying that God told you to trade crypto and sell when you did.
A bunch of guys in the Nixon administration did this. I'm sorry about that whole Watergate stuff. I'm really religious now.
Yeah. So this is also funny too, because this kind of doubles a little bit as a confession as well. Because I don't know if the jury, if he goes to jail, will be buying the God told me to do it, so can you let me off for all this fraud I did, please? Here's that compilation that Bender just referenced.
Caitlin and I are being charged in a civil charge from the Colorado Securities and Exchange Commission.
That's a real thing.
We're basically selling millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency that is deemed worthless by the state. Now, the reason that they're saying that it's worthless is because there is no exit for people who have bought. We launched an exchange. The exchange technology failed. Things went downhill, and from that point forward, we've just been waiting on the Lord, literally for a miracle. So, the charges are that Caitlin and I pocketed $1.3 million, and I just want to come out and say that those charges are true. So there's been
You're playing the game called capitalism.
Out of, I think it was a total of $3.4 million. But out of that 1.3, $500,000 went to the IRS, and a few $100,000 went to a home remodel that the Lord told us to do. So how this whole thing started is the Lord told us in 21 to walk away from our marketing company, and he said, I'm going to do a new thing. And then he took us into this cryptocurrency. It was a different cryptocurrency other than index coin at the time. Well, that cryptocurrency turned out to be a scam. And so the Lord said,
wait. Why didn't the God tell him that?
Yeah, why would God tell you to invest in a scam crypto? Why would the Lord tell you to invest in a scam crypto to begin with?
Because he's testing you.
Yes.
Or maybe it was the devil speaking in the Lord's voice, fooling this pastor, and he
Look.
fell for the devil's allure or whatever you want to call
God
it.
tells you to kill your firstborn son or buy this ape, and you say how high.
Yes. I mean, and I do love too that like the Lord misled him, but he did get the kitchen remodeled in exchange. So like the Lord giveth and taketh, honestly.
Yeah, the Lord didn't say like set that kitchen back how it was.
Give them a 10x. And I'm like, well, where's this liquidity going to come from? And the Lord says, trust me. Well, as money is coming in, we would be sowing it. And at first it was hundreds of dollars and thousands of dollars, then tens of thousands of dollars. Money would come in, we tithe, we sow, more money would come in. And so we were just always under the impression that God was going to provide, that the source was never ending, that God was doing a new thing.
Oh my
and that
God.
we had nothing to worry about. And
Oh my God.
we sold a cryptocurrency with no clear exit. We did. We took God at his word
my God,
and sold a
he's admitting.
cryptocurrency with no clear exit. And
He's
so the
blaming God.
prosecutors have to take that and say, these people willingly sold a cryptocurrency with no clear exit. What we're praying for and what we're believing for still is that
Sorry,
God
can
is
we
going to...
can we just go over what that means, Bender? Cryptocurrency with no clear exit, because like which cryptocurrencies do have clear exits? The one that you buy drugs with,
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's some that the almighty cryptocurrency with utility is usually that beacon on a shining hill. We're going to use biblical terms here.
Yeah, it's mythological.
This beacon on the that shining beacon on the hill, whatever it is that crypto has utility. And when someone comes up with a new cryptocurrency, the usual way they market it is, oh, all those other cryptocurrencies are scams. Ours is not, because it has that magical utility. What is that utility? Well, it's different. It's differently marketed by every crypto scammer, but usually it just amounts to, oh, I could have done this with money, like US dollars. Like there's nothing, oh, I could buy your game's assets, in-game assets with this cryptocurrency. Okay, that's cool. I could also do that with US dollars on any other regular mainstream video game. But anyway, what he's doing there, and what's truly amazing, is that basically the way a lot of these crypto scams work is the influencer launches a crypto. And in this case, I mean, this is actually pretty genius. I'm surprised other pastors have not come up with this before, because you already have that built-in loyal fan base that is your congregation. Other influencers would be salivating at the mouth for that audience. But he apparently told his congregation to invest in this cryptocurrency, and they would invest. And which didn't cost him anything. He made the crypto, so he was already holding a bunch of
out of thin air.
Right. So he basically is making money out of thin air as his congregation is buying these tokens, and as he sells the free tokens he keeps, the congregation's paid for tokens lose their value because he's selling off. And according to him, he was able to keep convincing his congregation to buy. And buy. And he was able to keep selling and selling and selling. And what usually happens in most crypto scams like this is eventually that influencer, whoever created the crypto, runs out of suckers to sell to, and it all falls apart. Your classic Ponzi scheme. You're no longer able to provide the money that's coming in to the people who want to cash out. In this case, I guess he was able to keep it going for a while because he basically was just bilking his congregation.
I mean, that's what congregations are there for.
And that's where the money went. Like they don't, the Ponzi scheme element is that it's not really available, guys. Sorry. I know that you bought all of these coins from me that are worthless now, but the Lord told me that I need a new marble countertop for my kitchen island. And that's where your money is.
And I just imagine, what did they think was going to happen though?
Yeah.
They believed
the world was going to use their church coin.
I mean, I'm sorry, if you're like a televangelist, scamming is your entire MO. Yeah. So I'm assuming he just thought this was a new business opportunity. I mean, I'm sorry. The Lord told him that it was a business opportunity. Yeah. And I love how religious people, when they want to like cover up their own desires, or if they're like gluttonous or greedy desires or whatever, it's the Lord directing them to it via basically prosperity gospel. But if somebody else sins in their mind, right, the Lord isn't telling them to do that. It's the devil. But I'm aware of the 7 deadly sins, and this seems to be a little bit in violation of it. Stealing from somebody else, being so covetous and or not covetous. That's for a wife, right? But like creating your own kitchen, renovating it with other people's money. But that's the Lord telling you to do it.
Yeah.
So silly.
Right. I want to make this like really clear to like in case any of the members of his congregation are listening. The 3.3 or whatever it was $1 million that your pastor received to do the remodeling that God told him to do, that $3.3 million came directly from all of you. He was taking your money directly in that way. This isn't like, oh, you got involved in a business and you guys were creating a product and you were trying to sell a product and it just didn't work out. Couldn't find enough customers, whatever. And so the business goes under. This is not even like that. He was directly taking your money by selling you a cryptocurrency that he was then selling off, a worthless cryptocurrency that he was then selling off, that he did not invest anything into. It's that simple. Like, you should know that, to be sure. But maybe the Lord told him to do that to all of you. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, he admitted it on camera. Probably not the best idea. I wonder if his lawyer is a little bit not thrilled right now.
It's just like, what the thing is like, this is exploiting an already existing pathology in America, which is money for nothing. And like even those church folks, when they gave up their cash money for what, index coin, whatever the fuck his shit's called, they were imagining at the end of it more of what they gave up to get it, which is US dollars. And it's some sort of fantasy that every one of these idiots thinks, which is that like, I'm buying this, in the future everyone else is going to want it and I'm going to be able to unload it. And like, nope, actually nobody wants the ape NFT. Nobody wants the Shaq NFT even. Like people prefer good old fashioned basketball cards.
I am interested in finding out how he marketed it to them. I wonder if it was just the old fashioned, invest in this and you'll make lots of money. Trust me, I'm your pastor. Or I wonder if he actually really used their like religious based fears and was like, this is like what you need to do to survive the end times. Like, I really wonder what he went with here. I want to dig into this one.
Yeah, for sure. All right, really quickly, because let's just play this UAW endorsement thing, because we should cover that. So yesterday, Sean Fain endorsed Joe Biden for president. There was also during his speech a disruption by some of the members of the UAW who were upset that Fain ended up endorsing Biden before he called for a ceasefire, because the UAW has officially called for a ceasefire. And there's an article in The Intercept by our guest yesterday, Prem Talker, speaking to some of those UAW members who were disappointed about the fact that Fain endorsed Biden this early on. However, Fain has to represent a broad constituency, and it appears as though he held out for a while amid talks with the Biden administration for concessions and future considerations down the line, especially given the fact that Fain is calling for a general strike in 2028. And if Biden gets reelected, and if he survives until then, that will be at the tail end of his presidency, going into that election year, May Day 2028. So this was an excerpt from the speech here, Sean Fain endorsing Biden, and he speaks about Trump and why he chose Biden over Trump.
Donald Trump is a scab. Donald Trump is a billionaire, and that's who he represents.
He's a billionaire-ish these days. Probably not.
If Donald Trump ever worked in an auto plant, he wouldn't be a UAW member. He'd be a company man trying to squeeze the American worker.
That's true.
Donald Trump stands against everything we stand for as a union, as a society. When you go back to our core issues, wages, retirement, health care, and our time, that's what this election's about. This election's about who will stand up with us and who will stand in our way. Those are the questions that will win or lose this election and will decide our fate. Those are the questions that will determine the future of our country and the fate of the working class.
So that's all accurate, right? And of course, Trump would be a scab if he even knew what it was to actually do work for a living. But he literally went to a non-union shop to get a photo op after Biden went to the picket line during the UAW strike. So that is some evidence for that case as well. Also, Trump's just whole political philosophy and the fact that Trump, as a businessman, had a long, storied history of cheating out people that he worked for, that did work for him, whether it be contractors, whether it be workers, screwing them over. That he's not the kind of guy that kind of just screams solidarity to me. I don't know about you, Bender, but it was inevitable. I was a little surprised that it happened before any ceasefire was called for. But I think Fain has his eyes on a broader labor revolution for the country and for auto workers, especially as the UAW is ramping up its efforts in the South at non-union shops, like for Mercedes-Benz, to get even more people under the UAW umbrella and in the union.
Right. I don't know what the calculation was on the timing of that, because he was talking about Gaza and ceasefire quite recently too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Binder. It seems like there's been a effort by him or them to get some of the better stuff that Fain represents, which is the call for a ceasefire. Yesterday, where there was the thing released, maybe by Prem, about how Fain had told Biden, like, don't be so sure that you're the pro-union president that you think you are. I think kind of like maybe looking back on that ahead of this decision, which to me, I would have gladly have supported the UAW if they held out longer, or not endorsed Joe Biden at all. I would have lent my voice to support that decision. This one, right now, though, I think it's not exactly a surprise that this is the way they went. There's not really any sort of as far as like labor in which coalition you can get, there's not really a decision between the parties right now, and it's a sign of how much, like, you could say weakness, or more optimistically, how much farther we have to go. But yeah, it'd be nice if he could extract Biden to say ceasefire. I think UAW isn't that strong yet.
Yeah. I mean,
right. The calculation there could have simply been, like you said, Matt, like it's obvious that the union here was going to endorse Biden. The question was, when would they do it? And maybe the calculation was, maybe they hold a little bit more sway if they're in the room right now and are privy to what's possibly being discussed and going on within the administration about a variety of issues and policies.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm not privy to those conversations in part, so I hesitate to make judgments about it. I was slightly surprised on the timing, but I feel like Sean Fain is somebody who's just been a real revelation and an important figure for labor politics in the country, and he has a lot of incentives and constituencies to respond to from within his own, like, rank and file and things like that. But either way, having labor leaders advocating for Biden in this election, or having someone like him being a communicator, especially as we're seeing some bad numbers out of places like Michigan, you can see why the Biden campaign would see value in that. The future is still a question mark.
They're going to extract it and hollow it out
exactly.
for use an electoral project and then destroy it, which is what my concern is. And so
that's a valid concern.
Yeah,
it remains to be seen. I'm hoping that Fain, based on his track record, got some good concessions.
Yeah, I respect that process, right? Like I said, I would have supported Fain if he decided we're not endorsing anyone but again, that's a process I respect him, and also Brandon Mancia, who's another leader of the UAW, lower than Fain, obviously. I think I think people know that there's work to do. I think there's people in the UAW that understand the stuff as well as we do, and I respect that process, even though I'm a little bit disappointed in this.
All right. Well, with that, guys, I'm sorry, no more time for calls. I apologize. We went a little late on the interviews. Gonna read some IMs and get out of here. El Canipcion, Matt Lex voice sounds so zen today. I love it. BRB forever. God is my co-conspirator. Ayn Rand, Paul Ryan says, guys, help. I turn my entire life savings to crypto and I can't buy groceries. God told me to.
I gotta say, at my grocery store, the ATM has a crypto sort of thing. It's just this is predatory.
I was reading in Politico that Coinbase is ramping up its lobbying footprint in Washington, D.C. So we have not seen the end of this.
Oh, definitely not. Now, get ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Left or bereft, Emma wants to be Greta Thunberg when she grows up, and so do I. Yeah, I know. She's a hero of mine, but she's younger. She's just that cool. Ravens flock lets fly says, Emma, do you think you get Stavros Halakis? I don't even know how to say his last name because I only say Stavi. Yes. On ESPN. I know he's in some lefty podcast circles, and he's been doing so many sports podcast hits lately with his Ravens making it to the championship game. I wonder if ESPN reached out to him. You could get him on. Maybe. I mean, he was on Dan Le Batard's show the other day, so he's doing some big time hits right now, and he's on seemingly every Ravens game, sideline.
He's the unofficial mascot now.
It's amazing. I mean, look, Ravens are it's Ravens in the AFC and Lions in the NFC as the people's teams. So, I love how we called out Coward on Dan Le Batard, though. That was pretty fun. Freedom Poutine. Every time I hear Greta mentioned, I remember Sam trying to say her last name properly, and it came out as Thunberg, and Emma said, never mind, go back. It kind of is that, though, but I don't know if I'm actually messing it up, too. Tom Servo says, this week in Florida, the legislature is removing sociology from the core undergraduate curriculum and replacing it with a whitewashed version of U.S. history up to 1877.
Patriology.
They conflate sociology with socialism in their justification fund.
It's right there.
Jesus Christ.
Sociology, socialism. I see it. Can't hide
social media. That needs to be banned too, obviously.
Yes.
How about instead of sociology, we had patriotismology.
SoCal, no visiting there anymore.
Nope. Not allowed. It's already socialist anyway. Fetterman's blood clot says, Jesus Christ. Breaking news in Midwest excellence.
I believe that used to be John McCain's blood clot. And,
they changed it. Yeah. Minneapolis City Council has passed a pretty strong ceasefire resolution. Very good.
Yep. Shout out Robin.
Dr. Dragon Rider, there was a libertarian in chat who was arguing about terminology and wanted to debate, and I said, I'll message your area code to the show, and immediately he said no, that he wouldn't do it on the Majority Report platform because it would somehow disadvantage him. I failed at delivering a libertarian. I'm sorry, fam. He ended up getting banned for non-political reasons. Sorry, Shaquille, I did my best. Shaquille, why are you a coward? Call in.
That's always a great reason to not call into a show. I don't want to do it. It's somehow rigged in their favor. I mean,
sure.
They can't put words in your mouth though. I mean, if you say something and they shut you down, you still said what you said. It's not like they're using the knobs, the change the Tim Pool music sound knobs to change the words that come out of your mouth.
Yeah, we have the advantage of not subscribing to an infantile ideology.
Dave from Jamaica, Elon is such a bad liar. He promotes and replies to anti-Semites for sure. New phone who dis. Ben and Elon meeting of toilets. A meeting of toilets.
Aaron Brown fan.
Hogtown frown. It's a little late in the internet cycle, but congrats to Binder for his banger Jar Jar Binks. We be having a problem. Yeah, it was hilarious, Binder. I loved it so much. I loved that. Was a great.
I missed this. I don't know what you're talking about.
He was making fun of this Dutch
Geert Wilders or whatever, however you pronounce his
Yeah.
name. This far right. I remember him from like, back in like the what was it, like the Charlie Hebdo days,
Yeah.
where he was like the premier Islamophobic
He's
Dutch
Nigel
politician.
Farage. Yeah.
Yeah, and now he's like gonna basically lead the country, and he put out this hilarious tweet. Well, not hilarious, really. I made it hilarious, I guess, but he put out this tweet speaking Dutch, but it was like the words he used were, you know how a lot of Dutch words are very close to just like English, but like how you would have a baby speak English or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
Jar Jar Binks with the
the speech bubble, because it sounded like something Jar Jar would say.
It really did.
It was like, we have a big problem.
That's so funny you say that. I mean, look, I respect all of our Dutch listeners, but when I was in Amsterdam for the very first time, it was like 6 a.m. I got off a bus and at a gas station, and I was looking at all of and a little bit under the influence because this is Amsterdam, and was looking at all of the things on the packages and the way that the people were talking, and I could not stop laughing because it is similar enough, but it sounds like a Teletubby language.
Yeah.
Or something.
And I just want to say to all the Dutch listeners, I would not have said you guys have a language that sounds like Jar Jar Binks talk on its own. Like if some random Dutch person said had that tweet, I wouldn't have done anything with it. It was the combination of the Dutch language with Geert Wilders saying it is why. And I used the image of Jar Jar in front of the Senate and everything specifically because it was
right, proclaiming it. It was beautiful. All right, 5 more and we'll get out of here. Freedom Poutine, they beat the Righteous Gemstones to this storyline, right? Comtree, God bought a new yacht with his NFT money. Hack all the things. This crypto loser using God as an excuse to is pulling straight from Alex Jones. Jones says this shit every time something doesn't go, or he's as he says it's God testing him or sacrificing him for a greater good.
It's interesting that you don't see a lot of the crypto guys touting the role that crypto played in Hamas on October 7th, which is like kind of the use case that you're talking about, right? When the whole world doesn't want you to do something and you're able to do it anyway. I don't know. I don't know if you've found anything on that front, Binder, but I found that interesting.
Okay, 2 more.
Oh wait, I saw a message earlier that I apparently either misspoke or my voice cut out when I was doing that Mr. Beast thing, and people heard, or maybe I even misspoke and said that Mr. Beast has 30 million YouTube subscribers. That is not. He has 230 million YouTube subscribers, just to be clear.
Oh my God.
That is nuts.
Oh my.
Yes.
What?
Why?
That's what percentage of the human population?
That's a lot.
That's almost, that's just 100 million away from the entirety of the US.
Ay. All right. Chris, that woke skater, war and what it does to ecosystems is beyond devastating. Not only Palestinians and their pets, but zoo animals, fossil records, art, and local species all gone. Yup. And the final I am of the day. Amira, my grandmother was a victim of the Nakba. She was pushed into Lebanon when my father was born. He had a really rough childhood. It messed him up. I just wanted to say thank you for speaking about Palestine every single day. Their story needs to be heard. Appreciate
Thank you for that. Well,
thank you for. I mean,
I appreciate that perspective.
Any words of encouragement are great. Very much appreciated. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Binder, Bradley, and Matt. Great show. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding turn. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much longer I can stay in, or how much more I got to pay to play in. I know somehow